Volume 3 of Love, Death, and Robots is here, but are these episodes worth watching? Today, I'm going to rank them and talk about them. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. David Fincher is directing an animated short. Today, we are talking all of the episodes of Love, Death, and Robots and doing a super quick ranking, talking about them as we go. I need your comments down below and leave your rankings of these episodes. Which was the best? Which was the worst? I will fully admit I liked this season way more than season 2, and a couple of these episodes are some of the best of the series so far. Let's get into it right now, starting at the bottom with number 9, and that is Kill Team Kill, the 5th episode of the season where U.S. Special Forces are trained to neutralize any threat, even a cybernetic killing machine created by the CIA. Their secret weapon, a sense of humor. And it's not that the sense of humor did not resonate with me. The final line at the end where he says, "You tell my wife," you know, something like that. It's dumb. It's chuckle-worthy. I think the cast for this episode is fantastic. Joe McHale, Seth Green, Gabriel Luna, and they're going up against this huge, what they call this honey badger bear, a cybernetic bear that cannot be beaten, it seems. But the stakes aren't nearly as high as the other episodes in this season, and you don't have that emotional gut punch that's needed to allow something like this to stand out. I enjoyed the action, but it doesn't really have anything that's better than any of the other episodes. Like the animation, good but not as good. The acting, good but not as good. And I could go through each individual thing. I do believe it's an interesting idea, but not one that I'd like to see more of. It was fine, entertaining, but that's about that. Next up, 3 Robots Exit Strategies. This is going to surprise a lot of people because, of course, this is the follow-up to one of the prior standout episodes of this series, and it's not that it didn't do anything that did not entertain me. The return of our characters to this post-apocalyptic world. It's the trio of these droids returning to take a tour, studying humanity and their survival strategies. Essentially what went down to wipe us out and who actually survived at the end. Was it a cat? I'm pretty sure it was a cat. Regardless, I thoroughly enjoyed the setup for this, but as we went, a couple of things happening and political satire in there. Funny enough, entertaining enough, but putting it alongside some of these other episodes, it just did not resonate with me. And by the time I finished the season, it was one of the episodes I remembered the least. And that's why it's at the bottom of this list, or close. Next up on this list, we have Swarm, which is directed by Tim Miller, the creator of Love, Death, and Robots, and has a pretty interesting premise, that being 2 human scientists who are studying the secrets of this ancient alien entity, but they soon learn that the horrible price of survival in a hostile universe is huge. I really enjoyed the creature design and the movements of the characters in this episode. We start out with our scientists and slowly get into the action, the scene where he's being chased and squares up to these aliens saying, "Come on, let's go now." It doesn't turn out well, but those were the moments that captured me. The romance itself, there's just not a lot of time to build that up and have it resonate with you, maybe like the director, like Tim Miller, intended here, but a good voice cast. My biggest issue was all of the exposition. It's a really expository episode, so they're telling you things that essentially you could show me instead of just handing it to me on a platter. Regardless, even though it's lower down on the list, because I like this season a lot, I really enjoyed this episode, and it looked fantastic. Next up, Farmer Mason has a rat problem. Welcome to the rat-pocalypse. This is Mason's rats, and this was an episode that at first I'm like, it just seems really simplistic on its surface, but what am I talking about? This is Love, Death, and Robots. That's what they do best. I also love the fact that Craig Ferguson plays Mason. You also have Dan Stevens in this episode, and he's desperately trying to handle this infestation of intelligent rats. So he installs this crazy technology that is essentially the ultimate form of pest control. But as we see when the episode plays out, it doesn't go as he plans. It doesn't go as the rats plan. And there was a nice little twist at the end there. I love this episode because it's short, simple, does not overstay its welcome. It's almost the perfect length. It doesn't do anything revolutionary, and I can't sit back and say it's the coolest or the most interesting plot of all of these. But like I said earlier, sometimes that simplicity works best, and Mason's Rats is a good example. And that final moment where they're just sitting, it was kind of sweet. It's gross, but it's sweet. Then we have the very pulse of the machine. Of course, you see it in the thumbnail of my video. The animation in this one is absolutely stunning. But the story, while extremely subtle, and here's the word again, simple, caught my attention. When an exploratory expedition on the surface of the moon ends in disaster, an astronaut must trek to safety, dragging the body of her co-pilot while using these mind-warping drugs, dealing with her own pain. And at one point, the AI says, if you do this, it's not going to end well. All throughout this episode, that happens. But the visuals that come from not only her using these drugs, but just the setting in general of this entire thing was beautiful. Now, there's not much when it comes to the plot or really the action as a whole. You're more in it to see the background and what she sees, what she's going through, dragging her partner through this crazy, desolate landscape. And then, of course, the ending, giving you reason to root for her throughout this entire episode. I really enjoyed what they were able to do here. Did I want more from the plot overall in this episode? Absolutely, but the animation is stunning, and it was just simple enough to get me really invested. This one, Night of the Many Dead. I was so freaking creative. It's short. I believe it's the shortest episode of all of them, and you're getting this very broad perspective of something extremely small happening. The overview of the apocalypse, the end of the world. We get to see it essentially from God's perspective, but we also get to see how little of an impact it has on the overall universe. Hey, don't do dirty stuff in a graveyard, because you'll start the apocalypse. The way this thing started was cracking me up. The voices, it's like mice talking, but the perspective that we get is one that made for, even though we're seeing things that we've seen thousands of times in movies and TV shows, it's such an interesting way to look at it and to see it, and the scope of all of it, especially the way it wraps up, kind of had me a bit mind blown. I just really enjoyed this one, and I understand it's not going to be for everyone because it's satirical. It's overly ridiculous. I believe it's supposed to be ridiculous. That's what its intentions were clearly at the beginning of the episode. And it doesn't go on long enough to where it becomes annoying. I'm like, oh, could it? But it ends super quick, and I appreciate the artistry behind this. It was so freaking creative. Invaulted, Halls Entombed. I did not anticipate putting this episode as high as I actually did. Really, within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, this is interesting, but it's just another, military group, soldiers coming in, doing a mission. What's going to be so special? But for some reason, I really got invested in these characters, and it's more so after you see what happens and how it all wraps up that finale, which had me like, oh my God. We are deep in the mountains of Afghanistan where, like I said, this squad of special forces, these soldiers, their job is to recover a hostage held by terrorists. But that's not all, right? There is another evil that they have to confront. It's this elder god of ancient and terrifying power, but the creature design on these little miniature creatures following them and attacking them along the way, and then you get that confrontation by our lone remaining soldier and the sacrifice that she is willing to make to keep this god entombed, hence the name. That hit me on a level that I did not anticipate. The visuals are, again, great in this episode. They're so good. But what got me were the horror elements, was having me really on edge. And up until that ending, I'm like, okay, this is a really good episode. But the way that it ends and that ominous walk that she has with no eyes was, I just get chills talking about it. Really good episode, a little slower, kind of cliche, but I appreciate the impactful finale. Number 2 and number 1, it was actually really tough to decide which one I enjoyed the most. And it's not just because David Fincher directed my number one. I genuinely got most invested in that journey, but Jabaro is close. Jabaro is one of those episodes of television that hits you in a way that you just don't expect. And I feel as if it's going to be sort of divisive because not everyone's going to be up for the frame rate. This high-intensity frame rate where it's a little jarring and it's also filmed, made to where it looks like a handheld camera following our characters, and it's so crazy. It's like an animated acid trip of sorts. But you realize what this story actually is. It's a fantastical imagining of what they call a siren from folktale lore whose songs lure men to their doom, but her sorcery fails to work on our main character, our deaf knight, Jabaro, and the Golden Woman becomes fascinated by him. They have a couple of brief interactions. You see anger and greed and pretty much every emotion come out of our character. For me, it was the moment where he's drinking the water and it turns to blood and he has his hearing for the first time. All of these sounds, and they make an effort at the beginning of this episode to give us each sound and have them all come together to where it's, playing with our senses, playing with our emotions. But when he hears for the first time, oh my God, he completely loses it, and you feel every emotion. You also feel her emotions when all of this gold and these jewels are gone that she has collected from these soldiers who are now at the bottom of this river. And then we have that the final 5 minutes of this episode are just completely insane. Every sense while watching was just like, golly, man, I just don't know. I don't even know how they went about coming up with this. Number one, bad traveling. And this series is filled with impressive directors and talent across the board. But obviously the name of note, maybe other than Tim Miller, is David Fincher, who directed this. And this will not surprise a lot of people, the fact that it's number one, but just watch this. And it's hard not to feel and picture this turning into a 2-hour movie. That's how good it is. And the contrast of color, the stunning animation, the idea of what we're dealing with here. Just to give you the summary of this episode, it's a shark-hunting sailing vessel that is attacked by this huge crustacean whose size and intelligence is matched only by its appetite. We are dealing with mutiny, betrayal, and ventriloquism with a corpse when it controls this half of a body to communicate with one of our characters here who strikes a deal with this huge crustacean, and thus they go on this journey where there is plenty of betrayal and vengeance taken against the beast. And that's kind of our finale, our wrap-up, the scene where he's running through the stairs and you have the bright orange of the fire against the darkness of the foreground. Again, the color and just the visuals in general of this episode are spectacular, but it's the way this is made and put together and the scope of the 7 seas, it feels like, of this one boat is magnificent. And that final shot where we have our main character escaping and realizing that he did everything he did for a reason, that's not justifying it, but you understand why. And we are zooming out of our location and the madness that went down throughout this episode. It's a longer episode that is warranted. I could have stayed in this world for another 35, 40 minutes. Heck, just making a movie. Fincher, hey, David, first name basis, you watching? Just making a movie, man. Come on. It's really great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. That's my number one. But what did you guys think of these Love, Death, and Robots episodes? How would you rank them? Again, I liked most of the episodes. And even the ones at the bottom of this list, I didn't really hate an episode. And remember Volume 2, a couple of episodes where I was just like, I don't think I like them very much. So, big improvement. Probably the best season thus far. And a few of these really, really good ones match up with Season 1's really, really good ones. All right, you guys the best. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this video, drop that like down below. I appreciate it. See you soon.